Good evening from New York. We begin tonight in the southeast, where residents are still recovering from an outbreak of at least 137 tornadoes that devastated the region this week. The death toll climbed to 327 today, making this the nation's deadliest tornado outbreak since 1932 and the deadliest natural disaster since Hurricane Katrina. According to the latest figures, storms caused 34 deaths in Tennessee, 34 in Mississippi, 15 in Georgia, 5 in Virginia, and 1 in Kentucky. Alabama hit the hardest with 238 reported dead. At least 30 of those deaths were in Tuscaloosa. President Obama visiting that area today to survey the damage and detail how the federal government will help with the recovery effort.
We just took a tour, and I've got to say I've never seen devastation like this. I'm very pleased that we've got a FEMA director in Craig Fugate who is as experienced as anybody in responding to disasters even of this magnitude. And we've already provided the disaster designations. We've already provided the disaster designations that are required to make sure that the maximum federal help comes here as quickly as possible.
Now, the president has declared a federal emergency in Alabama, and FEMA officials are evaluating how federal funds might help in the relief in Virginia, Mississippi, Kentucky, Tennessee, as well as Georgia. Joining me now by phone is Alabama Congresswoman Terry Sewell, who represents Tuscaloosa and was with the president earlier today. Congresswoman, thanks for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. We want to get your reaction to how the president and your time with the president today as he toured the devastation there. What was it like to be with him, and what was it like to see the emotions that you could clearly read on his face?
Well, first of all, let me just say that the state of Alabama has experienced back-to-back severe weather. None of the devastation and magnitude of these tornadoes, but, just 2 weeks ago, the same district was hit by tornadoes. So, the fact that the president came to Alabama when there's devastation, as you expressed, all over the United States, we're just blessed that he came to see it. You can't really imagine this devastation until you actually see it with your own eyes. And, he said that he thought that this was one of the worst things that he had ever seen. So it was just overwhelming. And, Tuscaloosa is but one part of the state that was so badly affected.
Congressman, what has been the government's role in the rescue and recovery efforts that are taking place there currently? Congresswoman Sewell, can you hear me? Congresswoman Sewell, can you still hear me? Unfortunately, we've lost contact with the Congresswoman. I'll try one more time. Congresswoman Sewell, can you hear me?
No one's talking.
Unfortunately, we've lost our connection there with the Congresswoman, but we want to express that our thoughts and our prayers are certainly with that devastated area, and we want to thank the Congresswoman for her time. Joining me now is Associate Professor of Politics and African American Studies at Princeton University, MSNBC analyst Melissa Harris Perry. Melissa, it's good to see you.
Very nice to be here.
All right, so Melissa, what is the role, as I was asking right there of the Congresswoman before we got cut off, the role of federal government in this type of circumstance? I wasn't able to get an answer from her about what's taking place there currently, but in your estimation, what should it be?
Yeah, let me start by saying I have a great deal of respect for the Congresswoman. She is an alum of the university where I now teach and someone for whom I have great respect. And as someone who now lives in post-Katrina New Orleans, I can tell you that I also feel, I think as many Americans do, deeply emotionally for the suffering that is occurring in families and communities there in Alabama. So, I think that it calls us as a people, and of course, the way that we are called as a people, one of the most important ways that we respond collectively is through the government. And so a moment like this disaster, or like the disaster of Hurricane Katrina coming on 6 years ago now, reminds us that when we need to reach out to each other, when we need to provide resources to each other, the single most efficient and effective and humane and just way to do it is through swift government action.
Melissa, let's talk more about that, specifically about FEMA, and let's look at the cuts to FEMA in the 2011 continuing resolution budget. FEMA First Responder Grant, $786 million. FEMA Flood Map Modernization Fund, $38 million. FEMA National Pre-Disaster Mitigation Fund, $50 million, and FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter, that stands at $80 million. So Congress has really politicized this organization once again, hasn't it, Melissa?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. And again, for those of us about to head into hurricane season, for all of those people in all of the affected states right now by the tornadoes, this lack of disaster planning is indicative of precisely the kind of short-sightedness going on with the federal government right now. I mean, quite honestly, what we know about these sorts of disasters is, we're all subject to them. Anyone at any time could have a natural disaster. But the people most likely to have the worst victimization are the people who are most vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled, those who are poor, young children. And if you look at our current budget crisis and the choices being made by Republicans, they are cutting exactly the kinds of disaster planning, both for long-term disasters and short-term disasters, for exactly those vulnerable populations.
Melissa, I want to ask you to stand by because we were able to get Congresswoman Sewell back on the line. Obviously, cell service is a little bit in and out in the area, but Congresswoman, you can hear me now, correct?
I can. I'm so sorry. I'm actually surveying areas of my district in Birmingham now. So I apologize. Really bad service.
No need to apologize whatsoever. But I do want to ask you, what is the current role of government right now in the continuing rescue and recovery efforts there?
Yeah, well, the National Guards are here. The governor has also, because of the order that the president gave, been able to offer some local assistance with respect to the recovery effort. So, it's slow going, frankly, and we're going to be, I think, in the phase of rebuilding and recovery for a very long time.
President Obama has declared a federal emergency for the state of Alabama. How important is that declaration right now? And also, in your estimation, how important is FEMA to what your state is going through right now?
Well, I have to tell you that the declaration is of utmost importance. I mean, the cumulative effect of all the deadly storms and tornadoes that we've experienced has really put a great strain on local government and state government resources. So having FEMA here and federal assistance available to the citizens in Alabama, and it's just really will help our rebuilding our community.
Congresswoman Sewell, we're going to let you get back to surveying the damage in your state. But again, our hearts and our prayers are with you and everybody there that was devastated through this. Obviously, again, we're having difficulty with our connection there. Melissa, you're still with me, right? You haven't left me?
I am.
All right, good. As we heard right there, the president declaring a federal emergency for Alabama. But oddly enough, this is not taking place in Texas. Wildfires there have leveled nearly 2 million acres, killed 2 firefighters as well. I want you to listen to Tea Party-backed Texas Governor Rick Perry's reaction to this.
There's a point in time where you say, hey, what's going on here? I mean, why are you taking care of Alabama? Why are you taking care of other states? And for some reason or other, the letter didn't get lost in the mail.
Okay, so that's not easy for a Tea Party-backed governor like Rick Perry to say, is it?
No, I mean, look, this is a governor who at one point talked about secession. Who basically said, I don't need that federal government, and particularly that language of take care of. There's been this attack on the notion of the nanny state and this language about we want the federal government to be small enough to drown in the bathtub. But the thing is, if your federal government is drowning in the bathtub, it cannot throw a life preserver to you. I mean, these moments remind us that this kind of intense need is precisely why the collective will of the people, right? The government is here. This is what it is for. It is for moments like this and for the long-term planning against broader disasters that continue to impact all of us.
Melissa, while I have you, I want to switch topics and get your take on Indiana's Republican Governor Mitch Daniels announcing that he's going to sign a bill that restricts abortions and makes Indiana the first state to cut off all government funding for Planned Parenthood. I want to read you part of his statement that he put out. It said, I commissioned a careful review of access to services across the state and can confirm that all non-abortion services, whether family planning or basic women's health, will remain readily available in every one of our 92 counties. In addition, I have ordered the Family and Social Services Administration to see that Medicaid recipients receive prompt notice of nearby care options. So do you buy Governor Daniels' argument that women in Indiana will still have full access to these services?
Of course not. And I know that for some viewers this might seem like an abrupt shift from talking about a disaster to talking about this, but I think that this is exactly what we need to be doing. If we think that disaster is only the flood, the tsunami, the earthquake, then we are missing that the suffering that our fellow citizens endure most of the time are long-term disasters of poverty, of homelessness, of joblessness. And frankly, the most central one are the disasters of our lack of access to health care, and particularly for women. The fact is that for the first several decades of a young woman's life, from about 18 to about 50, reproductive health care is the #1 form of health care that we are seeking. To shut it off, to shut off access to it, to even turn that tap down a little in these kinds of circumstances is basically to invite a tsunami of health crisis for the women of Indiana. And it is appalling to see exactly this kind of state-based decision to create disaster. And when these disasters come, the whole point is that we need government there to help us, not to make things worse.
Melissa, thanks for rolling with the punches here with me tonight. I appreciate it. MSNBC political analyst Melissa Harris Perry. Again, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.